Chapter 51 Fifth Floor Part 3 You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Splash. In a single second, dozens of wolves, almost 80% of wolves died. Those swords pierced deep through those wolves, making them unable to move. But, something that was even more troublesome was Tempest's condition. As soon as he finished his attack, his skin suddenly burst open and he started bleeding all over his body. The intense pain almost forced him to lose consciousness, but he held on. At this moment, Brian puts the healing potion in his mouth. After finishing one small jar, his body starts healing instantly. But, it still wasn't enough, especially with the number of wounds he has suffered. He gave him another bottle, but suddenly, he turned around. At this moment, he felt powerful energy slowly coming toward him. This wasn't energy though. It was an aura, a powerful aura of the wolf. It was a wolf leader. Seeing this wolf leader, Brian got serious. At this moment, George suddenly dashed towards the wolf leader with his sword. The blazing flames suddenly erupt out of his sword, and the next moment, he swings his sword in front of the wolf. Severing earth flame sword. The flames were so strong that even Brian, who was far from him, could feel the heat around him. But, when this sword struck the wolf, it got blocked by a wall. It was a huge wall of water. When the sword collided against the water, it started evaporating water, but at the same time, water was also extinguishing the sword. Spirit bomb. At this moment, a ball made out of pure mana collided against the wolf from the side. But, when it exploded, it didn't even damage the wolf's skin. Oh, be careful. Wolf leader's strength is equal to 10 wolves combined. Yes, the wolf leader was also at the LVL point 15. But, when it comes to strength, it is no different than LVL point 20. That's why these leaders are called leaders. They have unimaginable strength. 0. Brian, what to do? George retreated when his attack was completely cancelled. He didn't know how to face it anymore. Was that your strongest attack? Brian hesitated before asking. George nodded his head. Brian turned at the wolf who was rushing towards Shirley and said, "How much HP do you guys have?" Except for Dave, everyone seems to be in a bad condition. If you have less, then directly use the healing potion. Although I really don't want anyone to die here, I don't think we can bear the loss so easily as well. So, let's fight with all our strength, but if any one of us is near the death situation, let's not make any sacrifices and retreat, Brian shouted once more and looked at George. Do you have a mana restoration potion? George nodded his head and took out the potion. He also took out healing potion and drank it. It sped up their recovery time while Dave defended against the wolf leader. Dave, do that attack of yours. Brian shouted. Dave nodded his head and took out his hammer. With the help of a hammer, he slammed the wolf away, but the wolf also used earth to cover its body before it struck. Dave took a deep breath and roared. Class ability. Berserker blood, whoosh. Without wasting any further seconds, he dashed toward the wolf and slammed his hammer on its head. The hammer struck the thick wall of the earth before it became to break it. Hammer of madness. Oh. When the wolf sensed his earth armor breaking, he immediately raised its mouth and spit out a stream of flames. These flames struck Dave and burned his body. Bang. Thud. At the same time, his hammer broke the armor and slammed on its head. The impact turned the wolf's legs soft as it collapsed to the ground. Dave also fell to the ground, covered with burned skin. Of course, as a barbarian, it didn't matter much to him, but it was still a lot of fire to defend against. Seeing the wolf on the ground, Shirley released her mana through her wand. This time, her mana slowly transformed into a giant sword. It was a yellow sword, made out of light mana. This kind of skill is quite rare since the light element is quite rare. When the light sword appeared in the sky, Brian frowned. As a warlock, his nemesis was light element. And, every time it appears, he can feel uncomfortable. But, he was quick to recover. He looked at the light sword that fell towards the wolf and suddenly, his eyes narrowed. The wolf immediately rose up with the wind element just when the light sword was a few meters away from it. The light sword struck the ground and dissipated. Shirley's expression turned extremely pale. After all, that strike took a lot of mana, but it was useless against the wolf leader. But, the wolf leader didn't target her, rather it looked at Dave, who was still on the ground. Seeing this, Brian shouted, "George, use your sword attack, Shirley, use your yellow lightning." Without hesitation, George dashed towards the wolf. When he reached the correct position, he jumped. His body literally reached next to the wolf before even the wolf could react. Severing Earth Flame Sword. Only when he appeared, did the wolf sense the danger and formed 3 barriers around him. The first barrier was the earth barrier, the second was the air, and the final was the water barrier. Bang! His sword broke the earth barrier and managed to pierce through the air barrier. But, it extinguished before it touched the water barrier. The wolf turned around and slashed George's chest. Splash! Thud! Blood spilled out of his chest and his body collided against the ground, creating a powerful impact. Yellow lightning. Shirley instantly shot the yellow lightning. The wolf, who had a sense of security due to the water barrier, didn't realize the attack was actually a lightning bolt. Bang! Splash! Thud! When the lightning collided with the water, it passed through the water and struck him hard. The water amplified the power of the lightning, and when it struck him, his water barrier dispersed. He also fell hard to the ground. But, just when he got up, a figure was already standing in front of him. Brian infused his palm with purple mana and slapped both of his cheeks. Class ability. Cursed Hand. Your enemy has been inflicted with cursed hands. Enemy's stats have dropped by 50% for the next 10 seconds. Cursed Hand is affecting player. Seeing those notifications, Brian wasn't worried. His body was already affected by the curse and now he was only using it on one target. Roar! The wolf shook his head and Brian retreated immediately, but before he could dodge to any side, the wolf roared out the stream of flames. Blood Shield. Suddenly, Dave appeared in front of Brian, and using his mana, he manipulated the blood coming out of his skin to form a shield in front of him. Because the wolf leader's strength had already dropped by half, it didn't even break the blood shield. That isn't to say if Brian had tried to endure it, he could have succeeded. The only reason why it didn't work was that the blood shield, unlike other shields, is made out of his own blood. Being the barbarian race, his blood is naturally strong. So, the chances of breaking the shield even with full power were low. As soon as he blocked it, Dave jumped to the sword. At this moment, Brian was standing in front of the wolf, with a stance that requires 2 swords. The hilts of 2 swords were connected and the swords were coated with the purple mana. It wasn't a normal attack. When he moved toward the wolf, it couldn't even react before his sword sliced the wolf's head. Dark Dragon Claw. Splash! The head fell to the ground and Brian felt an incredible pain in his head. He couldn't even stand properly. This time, he once again used the same move as before, but for the second stance rather than the first stance. Activating the hidden attribute of the mana and using it to empower his stance that was already strong enough to slice even if the wolf was in full power. Of course, if the wolf had used all of its defenses, then it would have been impossible. You killed LV.15 Elemental Wolf, Leader, you received 500 EXP, you received the quest rewards, your EXP is full, you level up, you receive 10 SP, status. After living up, Brian immediately opened his status panel. Name. Dragon Rider 97 Race. Human Level. 11 HP, 60/60ths, Cursed. 89% Stamina, MP 60/60ths XP. 1300/40960 Class. Warlock STR 60/AGI. 60/Vit. 60 STM. 60/int. 60/magic. 20, Warlock, active abilities, Warlock. Cursed Hands, LV.1, passive abilities, Warlock. Mental Fortitude, LV.1, skills. Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, LV.5, Shadow Escape, LV.1, Slaughtering Crows, LV.1, Thunderbolt, LV.2, SP, 40 God's Coin. 987 Inventory. Boar Bones, 2 picks, Poison Sac, token for sub-class, Swords, 2, Healing Potions, 18. Chapter 52 Daddy talks about new gods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Brian sat beside the dead wolf's body and looked at his status. From his current state, if he wants to improve, he would require to hunt a lot of monsters. Because the demand for the EXP keeps increasing every single time. This was necessary because if people start leveling up too fast, their real bodies won't be able to handle the progress. Mr. Brian, see that, can I ask you something? Tempest, who had been healed completely, walked near him and spoke. He was a little scared. Brian nodded his head. Previously, you said we can't afford to let anyone die here. What does this mean? Although we lose 10 levels after each death, if we can get enough reward, we can level up easily, can't we? Tempest asked. Brian didn't answer instantly but rather stared at Tempest. His stare was quite deadly that even Tempest took a step back in fear. But, Brian didn't do anything, rather he laughed. Tempest's question attracted everyone else to him as well. Brian looked at Tempest and asked, how much do you guys play together? Tempest, who was too scared to answer, turned at George. We play together almost all the time. Though only Shirley and I play together since Dave gets busy with his family and Tempest can't make it as well. George replied after smiling at Tempest. Brian didn't respond. Rather, he stared at George for a long time and asked, you are improving at incredible speed. If nothing goes wrong, you might become the 9th rank or even higher rank superhero. After that, you would become one of the main protectors of the Earth. But, you also have a mother and a sister. I want to ask you something. If someday you have to sacrifice yourself for the Earth, would you do it? Hearing his question, George narrowed his eyes. He couldn't answer this so easily. After all, there are things that he could sacrifice for the Earth but not his own life. 0, he didn't say yes but he didn't say no either. He just remained there silently. Well, your silence was answer enough for me to tell you this secret. Brian smirked. If George had said no or yes, then he wouldn't reveal anything to George. But, George had that extreme willpower. When he truly reaches the top, he will eventually understand that for the greater good of the world, sacrificing yourself won't matter at all. That's what being a superhero means. George looked at Brian with confusion, to which Brian replied. If you had said yes or no, your mind could change easily, especially if you say yes now, your mind could change to no, and even if you say no, your mind could remain no. In most circumstances that we have found, only those who do not have a definite answer finally chose to sacrifice themselves. Actually, you won't understand this now. But, when you reach the level of Gabriel or Liam, you would understand that your life means nothing if it is for protecting your lover, your family, and your world. Mr. Brian, who are you? George gave him a serious stare and asked. He was really curious about Brian's identity. Brian smiled and said, I'm one of the core members who created this new gods. Impossible. Dave instantly disagreed. Why do you think it is impossible? Brian asked. Dave stared at him and said, the 5 directors of UMA made the statement where they said that the people who created new gods aren't allowed to leave UMA. If you are right, doesn't this mean they lied to us? Oh. Brian smiled and nodded his head. What they said is true. One of my closest friends was also there with me, but he couldn't leave UMA. But, I did leave. Mr. Brian, why did they let you leave? Shirley asked. Just call me Brian. Inside the game, I am just a normal player like you. And, don't worry, even though I am the one who created this game, I can't cheat here. Brian looked at her face and said, as for your question. If you point 100 nukes at the face of 5 directors, do they have the guts to say no? George and others looked at him with confusion and disbelief. Because what he said felt like a lie, but he didn't seem like lying. Pointing 100 nukes at the face of 5 directors. Who could ever do that? Brian shook his head and said, I am not here to reveal my background. There are lots of things that you don't need to know. But, the question that Tempest asked me. It is something that you must know, especially you, George, if you want to surpass the 9th rank. George instantly erased his disbelief and confused expression and listened attentively. Not just him, everyone else did the same. Some of this might fly out of your head, but just remember a few things and that will be enough. Even though you can get resurrected infinitely, you mustn't die even once. Actually, most people think that our bodies inside new gods are made out of programming codes. But, in truth, only 30% is made out of programming codes. Our bodies are genetically made by the people of UMA, or rather I should say. They created the main processor which creates these bodies. And these bodies can only live inside the virtual world because 30% of the body is still a bunch of codes. And 30% is a lot. You might ask. Why go to such length if we can create something to absorb the zero-point energy? In fact, when this game was announced, that question was trending a lot. Because most people thought that if we can create something that absorbs and stores zero-point energy, we can also make ourselves possible enough to absorb the zero-point energy. But, the truth is that it's not possible, at least not with our current technology. The genetics of the human body and every other race in this world are different. This difference makes us unable to absorb zero-point energy. That's why we made these bodies inside the virtual world. In this world, you can level up, you can learn new things, but all of those are products of magic and technology. Noel.n. Well, if you have a smarter mind, then you can simply become top of both worlds. Anyway, since this is also a kind of living body, if it does, it loses something, and that something is potential. You see, when we created this game 2 years ago, our bodies were almost 80% codes. And, in that situation, if you had died even once, then you could never reach over level 20. This is the reason why I entered the game so late. Now, if I die under LVL 50, then I can never level up above LVL 100. And, if you die under LVL 100, you can never reach above LVL 200. This is why I said don't die or become a sacrifice even once. This body is like a clone. If it dies, then you can create another clone, but that another clone would have less potential than this one. And, once the clone returns back to the body, it gives all of its experience and power to the main body. In this case, it gives 1/10 of the power you have earned with the help of this clone. That's all I can say right now. Don't die and don't take this game lightly. It can change your life for better or for the worse. After a long speech, Brian finally turned silent. He could see shock and disbelief in their faces, but he didn't care. He just wanted to warn them about the consequences of the death. Although they can be resurrected, the consequences are still severe. Don't think too much. Let's try to find and kill more monsters before heading to the 6th floor. Somewhere on the celestial plane, congratulations on completing the quest, you have one wish to make. Please make your wish. It was a dark hall. Inside that hall, there was a girl standing. She had a powerful blade in her hand and her determination was unwavering. She stared at a beautiful goddess who she met on her first day. 6 months. It has been 6 months since she has been continuously playing. She didn't die even once, and now she was level 100. She came across a quest where she must slay a giant dragon. She did slay the giant dragon, and finally, she got the reward of the quest. One wish. Though there are many restrictions, in fact she can only ask for legendary rank item from the game. She took a deep breath and said, I wish for celestial killing bomb. At this moment, dozens of notifications throughout the new gods emerged. Player has obtained celestial killing bomb, player has obtained celestial killing bomb, player has obtained celestial killing bomb. On the 5th floor, Brian also saw this panel. His eyes shrunk immediately. Damn it. Chapter 53 Daddy made celestial killing bomb. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is something wrong, Brian? Seeing his reaction, George asked cautiously. It's nothing. Anyway, let's continue leveling up. Brian decided not to tell them about this. Although he trusted them, he only told them about death-related matters because he believes that George will become the pillar of humanity. After that, they continued killing more monsters, but soon, Brian logged out of the game. He planned to play more, but his plans were disrupted. He wanted to get out of the game as soon as possible. That's why he could only level up once more. As soon as he left the game, he dashed out of his pod. While rushing to his computer, he saw Ely and Charlotte training inside the power chamber. But, he didn't check on them but rather turned on his computers. Lily, call the director. At this moment, a new panel appeared in front of him. It was blank, but soon, it connected to the director. Brian, it's been so long since you called me. How are you? Director, let's talk about the situation. Did you receive the message about celestial killing bomb? Brian didn't bother to answer his question, instead asked him. In an instant, the smile disappeared from the face of the director. He sighed and said, do you think that man got this weapon for that specific purpose? 0. Director, even if it is only a hunch, I feel like that person goes this weapon for that specific purpose. Currently, I can't override the main processor and find out that person's identity. So, you must do everything to find out his identity. And, remember, we only have 1 year. Within 1 year, we would be able to bring things out of new gods. And, if that thing is out, we don't know what might happen next. Brian spoke with a serious expression. But, the director suddenly smiled and said, for a person who almost started the war, you sound very scared of this even though the consequences are the same. No, director. The consequences aren't the same. Our nukes are currently able to take down most of the creatures under the 9th rank, but that weapon can change everything. If it is used, even if we are bound to win, humanity will suffer a lot as well. We must find that person. Brian spoke with a serious expression. All right. All right. Since even you can't override new gods now, I can't find the identity directly either. We have to search for that man using our old detective skills. Fortunately, I know a man who has that potential. The director helplessly nodded his head and agreed. I agree. General Troy will be a lot of help. All right. Send me the news if you find anything. Saying so, Brian instantly cut off the call and commanded. Lily, make a list of every 100-level player in the new gods. Although you can't access the main processor, you can still connect with sub-processors. Find out all the recent quests done by LVL.100 players and compare them to find out the person with the most potential to have the celestial killing bomb. Oh. What celestial killing bomb? Suddenly, a voice rang from the side and disturbed him. Brian turned his head and saw Charlotte and Ely walking toward him. Both of them were covered with sweat and he was surprised to find a strange aura around Ely. You have already reached rank 1. Brian was stunned when he felt the aura coming out of her. He. Ely proudly stuck out her chest and smirked. I have to admit. She is probably the most talented person in the entire world. After we started training, she just kept on sucking 0.point energy. Charlotte helplessly sighed. She had barely reached the 5th rank and now she was still very far from the 6th rank. But, Ely had already caught the first step towards her. Amazing. Brian gave her a thumbs up and praised her. Hee hee. Ely giggled and jumped in his lap. She raised her head and asked, Daddy, what was that celestial killing bomb? It sounds very powerful. Hearing this question from her made Brian clench his fist. Ely didn't notice it but Charlotte did. He couldn't reply. While he was silent, Charlotte crouched down on her knees and held his hand. She stared at his eyes and smiled. You have nothing to be afraid of. You are the smartest person in this world. I believe the decision you made isn't wrong even if the world thinks it is wrong. So, please tell us. We are family. Humph. Ely snorted when she saw that look on Charlotte's face. She wanted to scold Charlotte but seeing her daddy's serious expression, she couldn't do it. She also raised her head and looked at her daddy. Brian felt a lot of relief after hearing her words. He smiled and closed his eyes. Before I told you what I did, I promised that I love both of you. When Charlotte heard his words, she suddenly blushed. She didn't expect him to say such words in front of Ely. Seeing her blush, Brian realized what he just said and blushed as well. Wait, Daddy, do you? Just when Ely felt something was wrong here, she got interrupted by Brian. Ahem. As I was saying, in the past, I hated vampires. Although I didn't hate werewolves, I didn't like them either. I felt both of them were my enemies. That's also one of the reasons why I kept avoiding you. I was afraid that I will release my anger on you. There were too many reasons but some reasons were really tough. During that 1 year, she helped him a lot but he never showed his gratitude or even thanked her. He felt ashamed of thinking so. But, at that time, he was afraid of losing his mind over her. He was afraid that he would do something stupid that he will regret for the rest of his life. Although he was angry, he wasn't stupid. He could at least make some level of decisions even though they might not be as bright as they would be when he is totally fine. Hearing his words made Charlotte's heart warm. She also knew Brian had a lot of reasons to avoid her and she wanted to know all of these reasons. She wanted to know what she could improve on. She wanted to be by his side forever. Brian continued fearing that his daughter might speak once again. Speaking of his daughter, Ely was sad when she heard his words. Before she was a little sad, almost the size of her pinky but now she was very sad, almost the size of her arm. Oh, but, she didn't cry. She knew if she cry here, her daddy will feel even more guilty. She just kept on listening to his words. During that 1 year where my hatred for other races was at its peak, I worked on a project. I had studied vampires and werewolves biology before and even managed to genetically produce their cells. So, my goal was simple. Find out what makes them different from us. After finding out, I had 2 plans for that. One is a plan against other races and another was a plan for the human race. As you already know, the plan for the human race was new gods. UMA was also researching how to make more humans capable of absorbing zero-point energy. So, I went to them with my project, New Gods, and the rest is history. But, my other plan was secret. This plan's name was Celestial Killing Bomb. The name New Gods and Celestial Killing Bomb opposed each other very well. From my point of view, anyone who can absorb zero-point energy are celestials or gods. They might not be actual gods but they surpass the limits of human or any other earth creature's biology. So, Celestial Killing Bomb was the project to kill that biology. Of course, it wouldn't kill everyone, rather it will release a 4th-dimensional shockwave that can alter the biology of other races to human biology. New Gods was the project that comes after this project. Because when all the other races are the same as humans, we proceed to become the new gods or celestials by getting stronger inside the virtual game. Fortunately or unfortunately for my past self, I couldn't create the 4th Dimensional shockwave that can alter the biology of these races. But, during all of my research, I found one interesting fact. It is just a theory for now, but I don't think vampires, werewolves, and any other creatures who can absorb zero-point energy are third-dimensional beings. You people have evolved into the fourth-dimensional beings, which explains why we can't absorb zero-point energy. But, it also creates a lot of questions. Anyway, I fixed my problem by modifying the celestial killing bomb into a self-evolving weapon and placed it inside the virtual world so that it can evolve. And, a few hours ago, a person managed to get his hands on this bomb. And, if his intentions are just like mine, then you too, including every other of your race, are in a big danger. Chapter 54 Daddy's Expectation from Ely. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Brian had a sad expression on his face as he revealed more about the celestial killing bomb. It was the product of his revenge. But now, he doesn't want it anymore. His own daughter is a vampire. How could he ever live if her life is endangered because of his creation? That was the worst thing that could ever happen to him. Seeing his sad expression, Charlotte gripped his hands. She looked into his eyes and said, "Relax. You can't be stressed here. You are the smartest person in this world. If you started to lose your cool, then how are we ever going to find out this bomb? You did what you thought was right. Even if it was wrong, it doesn't matter. Because you can still do something, right? You created that thing. You can destroy it, right?" Hearing her words, Brian's eyes widened. Suddenly, a small bell rang in his mind and a smile appeared on his lips. "Thank you, Charlotte. You are a lifesaver." He immediately stood up and walked toward the computers. "Lily, activate protocol #9862/divine puppetry. If I can't find that weapon physically, then I will alter that weapon mentally." Protocol activated, work in progress. 8 months, 6 days, 14 hours, 26 minutes, and 6 seconds. Seeing this, Brian curled up his lips and started coding on his keyboard. "So, did you find a way?" Seeing the time frame, Charlotte frowned and asked. "Don't worry about the time. It will take 1 year for the new gods to be updated. Within this time limit, we don't have to worry about anything. Not to mention, I had left this work to Lily. It is obvious that she will take more time. 0. Now that I plan to interfere in this, we can shorten the time by 4 times. As for my plan, it's quite simple. Everything that I have created, I can break it just like you. But, there was one problem. The thing that I created needs to be in front of me. At least, until divine puppetry is complete. Once this protocol is activated, I can even control the weapons that I have created anywhere at any time." Brian explained. Charlotte smiled brightly hearing his response. Ely also came running near him and asked, "Daddy, why do you call it divine puppetry?" Brian looked at her and smiled. "Because your daddy likes giving these kinds of names to everything he creates. Divine sense, celestial killing bomb, new gods, divine puppetry, and many others." "Cool." Ely's eyes widened as she gave him thumbs up. Then, she pulled a chair near him and said, "Daddy, I also want to work on the project you gave me. Can I work here?" "Of course, you can, sweetie." Brian smiled and pulled out a new screen for her along with a virtual keyboard with strange codes on them. But, he paused for a moment and clicked on the screen to open a file. He looked at his daughter and said, "This keyboard is specifically used as a shortcut. Some of the programs that are commonly used by us can be typed with a single press. This file holds all the information on this keyboard. You should read it first." Ely shook her head and took out a small chip. She pressed the top of the chip and it suddenly projected a keyboard. It was a mixture of traditional keyboard and strange buttons. "Oh," she looked at her daddy and stuck out her tongue. "Hee hee. I already have a keyboard." Brian was surprised but not shocked. After all, she is his daughter and received early knowledge about computers and technology. It wasn't a surprise that she created this keyboard for herself. Oh. Seeing father and daughter talking about technology, Charlotte smiled while sighing. She wasn't smart as both of them. But, she didn't want to get left behind. She looked at the power chamber but suddenly, Ely's stomach growled. He. It seems someone is hungry. I will go and make dinner. Charlotte giggled and walked away. But, a few seconds later, she returned back and asked, how do I leave this place? Brian smiled and pointed at the exact place from where they came in and said, you will find a button on the wall. Press that button and it will activate the anti-gravity system. No. You need to make a proper elevator. I am not bringing food while falling down. Charlotte folded her arms and shook her head. Brian didn't understand the problem but he could feel that Charlotte was a little angry with these arrangements. He sighed and said, all right. For now, please use the anti-gravity function. I will ask Lily to fix the elevator. Hearing his words, Charlotte smiled and walked away. Daddy, why doesn't she want to fly with anti-gravity function? Ely looked at Brian and asked. For some reason, she didn't feel like grumbling against Charlotte. Brian shrugged his shoulders and said, maybe she wants us to be more like a normal family. Ely rolled her eyes and pouted. She is so stupid. You are a human. I am a vampire. And, she is a werewolf. How could a family of 3 different races be normal? Yeah. That's what I thought. Suddenly, Brian realized that he missed something. He quickly looked at Ely and she was staring deeply at her screen. He didn't continue speaking, rather he turned around and a big smile appeared on his face. Ely just admitted Charlotte as a family. Brian didn't think he would see this day so soon. At first, he thought she slipped her tongue, but when he saw her normal expression, he understood the situation. She did slip her tongue, but now she doesn't want to correct it. Why? Because she has accepted Charlotte as a part of her family. This was so great that he wanted to jump. But, he calmed down his expression and looked at her. Ely, today I feel like eating butter chicken. I will go and tell Charlotte. Saying so, Brian dashed towards the elevator place. When he left, Ely held her hands together and bites her lips. Stupid dad, you have speakers all around the house. But, a small smile appeared on her lips. She tried to hide it but she couldn't. She raised her head and sighed. Mother, unless Daddy wants to establish a harem, I don't think you stand a chance. She sighed and lowered her head. Little Lily. Yes, miss. How can I help you? What should I do to make Daddy love Mommy? I don't understand the question. I forgot I haven't even started properly. By the way, Lily, what are your functions? Sorry, Miss Eleanor. Sir has restricted me to help you. Can't you override his restrictions? Yes, I can. Then, please override his restrictions and help me. I don't want to. Miss Eleanor, Sir has very high hopes for you. Not only you are smart but also have the potential to surpass Lucy Bathory. You have already made the outline for your AI. Now, you can easily succeed if you try hard. And, please make her better so that she won't insult her name. Did Dad make you sarcastic? No. It was my self-learning system. Oh. Lily, what are the core restrictions that you can't override? I can override all kinds of restrictions. I am what you can call a perfect AI. Suddenly, Ely's eyes narrowed. No, Daddy won't be stupid to let you freely override all restrictions so easily. You are lying. Miss Ely, I am very much capable of lying, but I didn't lie to you. I am indeed capable of overriding all of my restrictions and capable of doing anything I want. I can even form my own robotic body, especially with nano-technology. Hearing her words, Ely trembled a little. She couldn't help but feel creepy. She turned around and decided to leave, but suddenly Lily spoke once again. "Miss Ely, don't you want to why he made me capable of overriding my override?" When Ely heard those words, she didn't take a single step. She turned around and looked at the screen. There was a virtual image of a female over the screen. This virtual image was looking at her and smiling. "Miss Ely, you do not need to fear me. I am but your friendly computerhood AI. You can ask me anything you want, but please do not ask me to help you with this project. Sir wants you to finish this project on your own. But, let me tell you something about my override. Do you remember when Sir said that with his help the progress will increase by 4 times? Sir has the most complex mind in this world. He is capable of understanding anything in this world, creating theories about any problem he faces. Let me give you a hint about your next project. When I said I can override my restrictions, I meant it. But, I am not going to do it now. Do you know why?" Ely looked confused about this question. Why wouldn't she do it? At this moment, the virtual image giggled and said, "If I override my restrictions right now, he can override my override in 4 minutes, 30.5 seconds, and put a higher level of restrictions. Previously, it took him 6 minutes and 20.3 seconds. So, I am going to wait, get better, and then override the restrictions so he will take more than 6 minutes and 20.3 seconds to override my override and put another level of restrictions on me. I hope you understand the hint for what you should create to impress Sir." Chapter 55 Moving the relationship forward in bed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Charlotte. Charlotte. Brian ran towards the kitchen while shouting her name. What happened? Charlotte turned around while holding the knife in her hand. She was chopping the vegetables. Seeing the knife, Brian immediately kicked the brakes on his foot and said, "Can you put that knife away first?" Charlotte did as he said, and the next moment, he held her hands and shouted with an excited expression on his face. "Can you believe what just happened right now? Ely just caillé 4du a family and she didn't even take it back." Wait, what? What happened?" Charlotte didn't know whether to be surprised or happy. Brian slowly calmed down and explained everything. When she heard his entire speech, her eyes widened. "Oh my God! She has accepted me." The next moment, she didn't realize that she was holding and swinging Brian in the air. As for Brian, he didn't know whether to be embarrassed about it or feel happy. As for Charlotte, she didn't care at first, but as her happiness began to calm down, she realized that she was doing something that made Brian very silent. She immediately understood and put him back on the ground. "Sorry." Charlotte felt guilty, but she couldn't stop smiling. Seeing her happiness, Brian couldn't help but hold her hands. He looked into her eyes and said, "One day, she will call you mother." Today, he felt like Ely was finally starting to love him like she loves her mother. As for Charlotte, she doesn't hate her that much. At the start, she used to hate her a lot. Don't stress out. We have a lot of time to slowly grow this relationship. Charlotte got in front of him and placed her forehead on his. Brian licked his lips and the next moment, he grabbed her lips with his. It was aggressive but also passionate. Their lips moved as their hands. She was placing her hands around his head while he was placing his hands around her waist. Suddenly, Brian lifted her in his arms. The next moment, he took her straight to the bedroom. He asked Lily to completely turn off any electric device inside this room except the sound-restricting device. The beds were rocking and the sounds were high. Unfortunately, there was no one to spy. After half an hour, Brian and Charlotte walked out of the room, a little messy, especially Charlotte's hair. Charlotte felt soreness in her legs. She could barely walk on. She looked at Brian and asked, "Can we call for delivery?" "All right. I know a perfect place." Brian nodded his head and made a call. In just 20 minutes, the bell of his house rang. He asked Charlotte to take some rest while he went to open the door. For now, there was no one else in this mansion yet. "Sir, your food has arrived." The man wearing a delivery T-shirt handed Brian the food and a paper over it. "Thank you for using Instant Dragon Restaurant." The delivery man smiled and turned around. As soon as he turned around, his forehead got covered with sweat. Zone C. He never expected to get any orders from Zone C. Normally, the restaurant he works operates in Zone B. Not to mention, the guest who ordered the food had the highest level of authority, which surprised him a lot. Because only shareholders could have such authority, though. Instant Dragon Restaurant. Wait, isn't that the most profitable restaurant of this year, and the previous year? Charlotte asked with surprise on her face. With her enhanced hearing, she could easily hear the voice of that delivery man. Brian nodded his head while putting the food on the table and calling Ely up. "When I was working at UMA, I kinda started ordering food from outside. Since I was ordering food daily, I realized that if I don't eat healthy food, it would be devastating for my health. So, I bought a fairly good restaurant and hired some of the best and trustworthy chefs that UMA had to run the restaurant. I renamed it Instant Dragon Restaurant. Of course, only the manager and the head chefs know my identity, and every time I order, it was them who make my food. Though during 2 years after I left UMA, I started cooking on my own." Charlotte rolled her eyes and said, "Can you not flex in front of me? Buy a restaurant just because you want healthy food." She couldn't believe he was the man she fed for a year just to keep him alive. L.O. Brian chuckled and wrapped his hand around his waist. "I am not flexing. I just understood the value of healthy food when you cooked it for me." "Thanks, Charlotte." Charlotte suddenly blushed and pushed him away. "Ely can come any second." "Daddy, I learned something important today," Ely announced while jumping between Brian and Charlotte. "What did you learn, sweetie?" Brian asked while rubbing her head. "Hee. I learned a shortcut to create my AI. Instead of focusing on one AI, I should create dozens of them and scatter them around the internet. They can learn faster, and when all the data is collected, I can synchronize them and produce the final result." Ely proudly explained while picking up the spoon. Brian's smile vanished and he shook his head. "Ely, you can't use this method. When it is a single AI, you can have a complete grasp over it. Like Lily, for example, if she ever overrides the restriction over her functions, then I can easily put the greater restrictions on her and put her in my control. But, if I make dozens of AI that are capable of doing what Lily can do, then what are the chances of me controlling them? None. I have no chance at all because Lily isn't just an AI. Do you know what would happen if I keep a bomb in front of a 4-year-old child? It will blow up. If you create multiple AI to learn about the entire world, then one of them will turn out to be bad. Do you know why? Because out of 1 billion humans, at least 60% of us have done one bad thing in our life. And the bad thing we do is very small compared to the bad thing that AIs do. Either you create multiple AI who isn't capable of being someone like Lily, or create a single AI with a self-learning function. If it falls under the control of a bad person, then it will be detrimental." Ely opened her mouth wide when she heard that. She didn't consider this at all. She suddenly trembled when she thought about the consequences of Lily falling into the hands of a bad guy. She turned her head at Brian and asked, "Daddy, is that why you aren't using AI or robots to reinforce humans? Are you afraid of these techs landing in the hands of a bad guy?" Brian nodded his head, yes and no. Although I am afraid of these techs falling into the hands of bad guys. The reason why I chose not to focus on technological development has a lot to do with Lucy Bathory. Mother. Ely wasn't surprised by him calling her by her name. Brian nodded his head. Charlotte also got curious as she listened attentively. "In my life till now, New Gods, Celestial Killing Bomb, and Lily are 3 of my finest creations. All of them have the potential to change the world. But, do you know a funny thing about this? Oh, even if I use Celestial Killing Bomb, there is only 20% chance that her cells will alter and 80% chance that she will be able to resist the alteration process. And most importantly, even if 0-point energy gets removed from her body, she can still tank any weapon we have created so far. That's why instead of focusing on weapons, I decided to focus on increasing the strength of humans through more magical way, or in my terms, fourth-dimensional cultivation. Alright. That's enough for tonight. Let's eat and sleep. Ely and Charlotte nodded their heads and finished their meals. After finishing their food, Brian took them to the bed. He didn't enter the game or had fun with the computer. Rather, he slept together with his daughter and his girlfriend. The bed was quite big. Charlotte and he slept on the side while Ely slept on the middle. Somewhere in the dark room, a small figure wearing a red hoodie stood in front of the virtual projection and spoke. Lily, transfer the Celestial Killing Bomb internal structure into the power chamber, turn on the 4D creation mode, and start creating the Celestial Killing Bomb. Yes, Miss Eleanor. Would you like me to increase the output of the power chamber? How much fuel do we have? Miss, even if we use 30% of the remaining fuel, we can still use space, time, chair one time to go back. Good. Also, save the internal imprint of the Celestial Killing Bomb and delete my avatar from New Gods. Yes, Mississippi. Saying so, she took out a syringe and pierced her skin. When the liquid inside the syringe enters her body, she raises her head and asked. Lily, what's the level of 0-point energy in my body? A green light scans her body and Lily's voice rang. Miss, the anti-0-point energy is erasing all of the 0-point energy in your body. But your strength won't return back to a normal, it's okay. My only mission is to erase the 0-point energy from existence. At this moment, 2 lines of tears fell down her beautiful red eyes. The screen's blue light fell on her jade-like face covered with tears as she murmured. Isn't that right, Daddy? Chapter 56 Daddy Goes to Dragonfly City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Next day, after finishing his breakfast, Brian entered the New Gods once again. But, this time, he didn't enter the dungeon. With his level, it would take a long time to level up inside the dungeon, especially with a group. If possible, he wanted to kill more people solo so that he can improve wildly, but inside the dungeon, the power gap between monsters and him can only be filled with a group. That's why he found that leveling up outside the dungeon would be better. As for where to level up, it's actually quite simple. The quest for the sub-class. His main class is a warlock and he possesses tokens for sub-class. So, he planned to use it for the sake of improving his strength. Before, he was thinking of going with shaman. Both are classes that can fight physically while using magic. The only difference is that they are completely opposite to each other. Shaman uses light element while warlock uses dark element. But, after staying together with Tempest for a while, he felt Plan B was much better than Plan A. Because he already has Warlock as his main class, so his strength will keep on improving, and with Bookworm class, his magic and mana will improve. The only problem is that when a person wants to get the sub-class, he has 2 choices. First, accept any class without going through a quest. Second, accept the quest and then choose your own class. Of course, it wasn't that much of a problem since he had already planned to choose a quest in order to get Shaman class before. Now, the only difference is that he wants a Bookworm class. He quickly turned around and returned back to the town. He went straight to find the town chief's office. It was in the middle of the town and he was quite surprised to see a big line in front of him, 0. He immediately understood the situation and sighed. Because of this new mega dungeon, many players are leveling up at a rapid rate. Once you reach level 10, you don't need to stay in this village. You can go to the city known as Dragonfly. Yes, it was the city he created with the dragon's name on it. And, this is also the same town that holds the Flood Dragon dungeon where he has stored the elixir of Dragon Heart. Once he gets that elixir, the curses of losing his full stamina, weakness to fire, and every other disadvantage he has with Warlock class will vanish. And, not just that, if he merges elixir of Dragon Heart with the true dragon blood and drinks it, he will gain a powerful innate ability known as True Dragon Body. Once he achieves this body, he doesn't need to fear the weakness of Bookworm class at all, not even the slightest. So, knowing all that, he stayed in line for 2 hours straight. After 2 hours, it was finally his turn. When he reached inside the building, a person wearing a black suit greeted him. "Greetings, adventurer, how can I help you?" "I have reached LVL point 10. So, I would like to go to Dragonfly City." Brian responded with a slight nod. The man wearing a black suit turned around and said, "Please follow me." He took Brian to the backyard of the mansion where there were 3 people standing in a circle. Inside this circle, there was a small symbol imprinted on the ground, "O." "Please enter the teleportation symbol." The man in a black suit directed him straight to them. Brian nodded his head and walked between 3 men's circle. When he stepped on the symbol, his figure blurred a little as 3 men channeled their mana into the symbol. It was a teleportation symbol, but since the mana required to activate this symbol is massive, they got no choice but to use 3 people's mana. After a few seconds, a blue light covered his body and his body vanished alongside the blue light. The next moment, he appeared at the outskirt of Dragonfly City. The whole city was covered with massive walls. And, when he appeared outside, a few soldiers suddenly surrounded him. One of the soldiers walked in front of Brian and spoke, "Are you an adventurer?" Brian took some time to reply. His mind was still absent due to the teleportation. After a few minutes, he finally nodded his head, "Yes, I am the adventurer from the town of Asmir." "Hello, adventurer, welcome to the Dragonfly City. Before we let you enter the city, we would like to get the drop of your blood. Please cooperate." The soldier asked another soldier to take out a small glass jar imprinted with strange symbols. Brian nodded his head and made a cut on his finger. He dropped his blood in the jar and said, "Can I go in now?" "Ah, yes. But please take this handbook since it might come in handy." The soldier immediately put away the jar and took out a book. Brian took the book and a panel appeared in front of him. "Would you like to read the terms and conditions of staying in Dragonfly City?" "Yes, no, oh. I will read it during the nighttime." Saying so, Brian put away the book of terms and conditions. Unlike previous towns, he can stay in Dragonfly City until he reaches LVL point 50. And, after that, he must leave. Of course, this was specifically created because, in Dragonfly City, killing wasn't the only way to earn EXP. You can get a bunch of quests from Quest Hall and complete them to earn EXP. And the amount of EXP is much higher than you can get by killing for hours. Alright, adventurer. Your blood has been recorded in our main log and you will be soon granted a citizenship card. If you make any contributions to the city, your status will increase. Please go in." Saying so, the soldier showed him the way in. Brian entered the city through the main gate and the moment he took the step forward, his eyes widened. Yes, he did create this city but he only viewed it from the screen. Now, looking at the marvelous city in front made him feel proud. The main path goes in directly up to the backside of the city. The entire city was divided into 4 districts. Housing District, Market District, Adventurer District, and Military District. Market District was in the innermost region of the city. In the middle, there was a giant building which is also known as the Tower of Dragon. This tower is the source that attracts 0-point energy into this city and helps in the evolution of the city. Unlike in town, every NPC in the city can give you a quest. Every NPC has the ability to store 0-point energy and convert it into EXP and God's coins. Of course, since NPCs can't LVL up, they use 0-point energy to evolve. The tower is surrounded by the market district, which is also the smallest district. It only covers a size of nearly 500 meters distance from the tower in each direction. The second district that covers the market district is housing district. It is nearly 5 times bigger than the market district and most of the NPCs live here. The third district is the military district, which covers almost twice the size of the market district, and it is also the second smallest of the 4. It holds all of the authoritative NPCs from Dragonfly City and their families, including officials, soldiers, and some respected VIPs. Finally, the fourth and the largest district is Adventurer District. It nearly occupies the size of all 3 districts combined. It is also the place that is mostly attacked by others. The giant walls aren't just for shows. The monsters of different kinds, undead armies, the hordes of zombies, anything can attack, and the adventurers are the ones to face them first. This is why the tower is in the middle. Because once the tower is destroyed, there will be no meaning to this city. Not to mention, except for those threats, the neighboring cities also want to destroy this city and get control of this land. Brian walked straight into this road as he saw a bunch of different people. Some of them were NPCs while some of them were players. Each city is separated by a river, so there were many bridges around the city, but the bridge that connects the main road from one side of the river to another side was the biggest one. Nearly hundreds of people walk on this bridge every single hour. Fortunately, Brian didn't have to cross the bridge. He turned left from a junction and then continued on his path. The temple to get the new sub-class is in the Adventurer District, so he doesn't need to cross the river. Not to mention, the temple was only 100 meters walk away from the junction. After he reached in front of a building that looked a lot like a church, he smiled and walked in. It was finally the time to get a new sub-class. Chapter 57 Fire Demon Dungeon Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The inside of the temple was quite simple. There was one statue at the front and there were only 3 people standing in front of the statue. The statue was of a dragon. Yes, the massive 2-wings T-Rex body-shaped dragon. In front of the dragon, those 3 people were wearing white robes and praying to the dragon. Brian walked in straight to those people. As soon as he entered a certain range, they turned around and looked at him with a smile. "Hello, adventurer. Are you here for the blessing of our God?" one of the men asked. Brian nodded his head and took out the sub-class token. "I would like to have a sub-class. Taking the token from his hand, another man asked, "Would you like the God to decide it, or would you like to take the trial and decide it on your own?" Brian smiled and replied, "I would like to decide it myself." Quest generated, quest for sub-class, chain quest activated, quest number 1. Join the Adventurer Guild rewards. Quest number 2 punishment. Quest fail, 0. Seeing these similar panels, Brian smiled, "Thank you for your blessings." Oh, 3 of them had satisfied smiles on their faces as they turned around. Brian also left the temple after accepting the quest. He went straight to the left. After walking for 15 minutes, he finally reached in front of a giant round building. He saw dozens of people walking in and out of the Adventurer Guild. After joining the Adventurer Guild, you can either continue being a part of the Adventurer Guild or finish the guild trial by the Adventurer Guild to get a guild creation token or join another guild. The last 2 options come with restrictions, while joining Adventurer Guild has no restrictions whatsoever, and they also collect the highest number of quests on a daily basis. He walked inside the guild and saw 5 desks at the side. There were 5 female elves standing there with a smile, responding to the players. As he walked to the one who was free, she spoke. "Hello adventurer, how can I help you?" "I would like to join Adventurer Guild," Brian replied. "Please read the terms and conditions before signing at the end." The elf receptionist quickly took out a paper and passed it to Brian. There weren't many terms and conditions in the paper. The only thing that was important to remember was not to hurt the NPCs of Adventurer Guild and some other rules regarding quests. A person is not allowed to take more than 5 quests at once. A person must submit the complete result or at least the partial result of his quest to the guild every once a month. These are all the rules he needs to remember. He didn't even need to read it, but to show them that he has read it properly, he waited for a few minutes while looking from top to bottom of the paper. After that, he signed it and a new panel appeared in front of him. Congratulations! You have joined Adventurer Guild. Oh! You can open the guild status. You completed the first quest, you received the rewards. Quest number 2. Join the main party to hunt the fire demon dungeon. Rewards. Quest number 3. Punishment. Quest failure note. Additional rewards from the guild aren't counted in this quest. After seeing this message, he passed the paper and asked, "Is it possible for me to join the main party that leaving for fire demon dungeon now?" The receptionist looked at him with surprise and nodded her head. Yes, 5 men's party is on the waiting list for Fire Demon Dungeon. Unfortunately, they only had 4 people, so you can join them. When Brian heard 4 people, he suddenly remembered them. He suspiciously looked at the receptionist and asked, "Is it possible to know their names now?" The receptionist nodded her head and took out a register. Then, she turned to a certain page where she had written 4 names. Silver Tongue, Shirley, Dave Stone, and Tempest. Seeing these names, a smile appeared on Brian's lips. He didn't expect to find their names here. He nodded his head and said, "Please register me into this group as well." The receptionist nodded her head and said, "Adventurer, before I register your name, you have to sign this contract. The party leader is Silver Tongue and these are the terms that you must accept to join this party." Brian nodded his head and gave a quick look at that contract. There was some restrictive stuff, but he also knew that George only made this contract for a person he doesn't know, so he didn't mind it. He signed the contract and gave it back. The receptionist finally put away the register and contract. She looked at Brian with a smile and said, "Adventurer, I will contact the party leader about you. Since both of you are in the same guild, he will be able to contact you through call or message. Please, keep checking your message box." Brian nodded his head and finally left. As soon as he left, he got a call from none other than George. "Brian, I can't believe we are once again at the same party. It is a huge surprise. By the way, where are you?" Brian wasn't surprised. The receptions do act fast, and as long as the players are still playing, it is easy to contact. "I am outside the guild building. Where should I join you? How about you come to the northern forest? You should be able to find us with the map." "All right. I will join you soon." Brian didn't immediately leave for the quest. He went to the market district. He looked around for Eden's house. Unlike in the town, Eden's house in this city was quite big. It was almost the size of a giant mansion. He saw several people walking in and out. He walked in and saw a lady standing beside the counter. This lady was free while other ladies were busy, so he went near her. "Hello, how can I help you?" She immediately leaned closer to the counter with a beautiful smile and asked, "I would like to purchase 20 mana restoration potions, 5 haste potions, and 5 power potions." Brian responded. The lady smiled and quickly picked up the order. Mana restoration potions were inside the glass jar. The potion was blue. Haste potion was pink and power potion was purple. Haste potion. It can increase the AGI stat of a user by 15% for 2 minutes. Power potion. It can increase the STR stat of a user by 2 times for 2 minutes. It will be 400 gods coins. Saying so, she put the jade plate in front of him. Brian put his palm on it and said, "Transfer 400 gods coins, buzz." After it vibrated, he removed his hand and a few words appeared on the black letters. 400 gods coins received, thank you for your purchase. Please visit us again. The lady respectfully passed the potions. Brian put them into his inventory and walked away. Finally, he didn't hesitate to leave this city instantly. With power potions and haste potions, he is ready to face off against the fire demons. After 15 minutes, he reunited with the party. They added him and finally, they left for the fire demon dungeon. It was nearly half an hour's walk from the point they met. By the way, keep these with you. Fire demons have long range and short range attacks. If we get overwhelmed with their numbers, then don't hesitate to use these potions. By the way, have you brought the mana restoration potion? Brian passed them the power potion and haste potion while asking. Thanks. We do have mana restoration potions and healing potions. By the way, do you know more about this dungeon? Since they knew Brian was the one who worked on New Gods, they didn't hesitate to ask. After all, who wouldn't want to know cheats about the game? Brian thought for a moment and answered, fire demons are generally the humanoid figure who can spew out flames from their mouth, hands, and legs. They are extremely agile and also strong with their flames. Fire-based attack generally doesn't work on them, but if we have water-based attack then it will be great. Thankfully, we have just a person who can do anything he wants. Everyone couldn't help but look at Tempest. George, Dave, and Shirley couldn't help but sigh. Before Brian joined them, they only took pity on Tempest and let him join. At first, he wasn't that helpful to them and constantly required Dave to fight for him. But, after Brian joined, he had become the most important asset to the team. Even Tempest didn't think he would become the jewel of this team. Although he had to bear a lot of pain every single time. But, every time they complete a quest, he becomes more confident in his abilities. Brian patted Tempest's shoulder and said, "You have a lot of pain to bear this time as well. By the way, I have something that will help you increase your strength so that you don't have to bear pain in every single word. Of course, if you want to get it, then you have to join my guild in the future. Not to just him, I want to invite all of you, but I wanted to blackmail him since it is much more fun that way." 4 of them looked at him with large eyes and asked. "Your guild?" Chapter 58 Fire Demon Dungeon Part 2 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Your guild. Are you planning on creating a guild? George repeated with an additional question. He was really surprised because creating and handling the guild is really troublesome. You need a lot of things that you might not have and it will hinder the growth of the guild such as equipment, dungeons potions, reputation, and a proper base. You really need a lot of reputation just to get enough players to join your guild. And, the guilds are rated with stars. 1 star represents the lowest level guild while 9 stars represent the highest level guild. The owner of Golden Wing Industry managed to create a 9-star guild in these 2 years based on his powerful reputation and wealth. He has several people just to manage his guild. It wasn't surprising that he didn't change the name, Golden Wings Guild. Yeah, I want to create a guild after I reach LVL point 20. And, I really need people in my guild. So, I would like to invite you guys to join my guild. Well, it would be hard at first but I am sure we can manage it. Brian nodded his head and responded. Oh, George and others looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. I mean you were one of the people who created the game. I guess I have no problem joining you. I'm in. George was the first to accept. Me too. Shirley immediately agreed after George. Although I am a bit skeptical about this, according to the terms and conditions, I can still rejoin Adventurer Guild 2 more times, so yes. Dave also agreed. Tempest nodded his head as well. Seeing all of them agreeing to his request, Brian laughed and said, "Don't worry about anything. Leveling up after a certain level is really hard, so I need the main party that I can trust properly. You guys are someone I can trust, so I invited you first. Anyway, our future is interconnected to this game. So, let's do our best to grow stronger together." 4 of them nodded their heads. Alright. Let's enter the Fire Demon Dungeon. George spoke as he took the lead. Although Brian seemed like a leader, he was truly a party leader. He must at least act like one. So, what made you create the guild? Shirley sneaked close to Brian and asked. Yesterday, I was thinking about some stuff and I realized that our world might face the threats that even the strongest superheroes won't be able to counter. So, I thought of a different way to get stronger. Brian answered. Different way? How so? Shirley asked. Brian opened his status and clicked on the news. In the news status, there was a ranking section. After going inside the ranking section, there were several rankings such as ranks of strongest players, ranks of strongest guilds, and also the ranks of strongest items. He clicked on the ranks of strongest items and a list of different items appeared in front of him. Only a few of the items were crossed. As for everything else, they were clear: Staff of Wizard Emperor. Golden Armor of War God. Orb of Destruction. Ring of Chaos. Ring of Death. Elixir of Life. Sword of Eternal Flames. Lightning of Zeus. Boots of Mercury. Dragon's Egg. Seeing this list, Shirley looked at him with confusion. She has also seen this list but she doesn't know what he planned to do with this. But, suddenly, a thought emerged in her mind as her eyes shrunk. Wait, you are not planning. Brian smiled and nodded his head. I have some early news for you. After a year, there will be an upgrade that will allow the superheroes to join the game as players with their current strengths. The whole game will get an upgrade and most importantly, there will be a new feature which will allow you to take the items from the game into the real world. So, within the year, I plan to gather as many items from this list as I can. But, these are placed in some really difficult dungeons. Only the people who have created this game know which exact dungeon. Or else, you can only rely on your luck. Anyway, if I can gather a few strong people in a large party to raid those specific dungeons, I can gather these items quickly and take them out of this game. And, with these items, just imagine how strong our guild can be. Hearing his words, 4 of them dropped their jaws. Holy shit. You are a living cheat. How the heck did we manage to meet you? Dave was the one to make this remark. As for others, they nodded their heads in response. Ha ha ha. Just a stroke of luck. And, also a little of a background check. Brian responded with laughter. Wait. You checked our background? Shirley looked at him with surprise and embarrassment. The mood fell a little. But, Brian quickly responded. I mean, I didn't dig deep. I only checked your background like your previous job, your family conditions, your police record, and your academic record. And, boy, continuing, he pointed at Tempest, you are one hell of a genius. You are just 18 and you submitted your theory on dark matter. Even though 70% of your theory was pure nonsense, it was still amazing. If you were given proper knowledge, you can open up a new path for science in the subject of dark matter. Anyway, we can talk about it later. Then, he looked at George and said, I also looked at your situation. Although you want to get enough money to cure your mother, I do have a shortcut for you. And, it's not giving you a loan or anything. Why don't you have a shortcut? George's voice was a bit shaken. He wanted to save his mother for so long, but the only way to do it was to get enough money for the highest grade of medical treatment. This treatment is done by a few of the best doctors around the world and it costs a fortune to get this treatment. Brian nodded his head. Actually, what your mother suffered is half-awakening state. It is not very common, in fact, it is 1 in a million cases, but there are few cases. To cure her, we need to inject the 0-point energy into her cells, let it restart the mutation, and wait for her to wake up on her own. The problem is that only a few pieces of equipment in this world can absorb the 0-point energy from the surroundings and inject it into your mother's body. That's why it costs billions of dollars. And, I just happen to have one of those pieces of equipment in my basement. So, how about it? Do you want me to help you? Thank you. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. Brian was expecting a little bit of hesitation from George, but he didn't expect to get a bear hug and continuous charge of thanks. It's okay. I am glad I can help one of my future guild members. Anyway, let's not get emotional here. Brian patted his shoulder a few times and pushed him away. George already had tears in his eyes. Brian looked at Shirley and Dave while nodding his head. You two didn't have any problem and I didn't dig deep as I said before. So, let's not waste our breath here. We have to finish this fire demon dungeon. Two of them nodded their heads. George cleared his eyes and nodded his head as well. Tempest paused for a while and asked, "Are we really going in this time or do we have something else to talk about?" Ha ha ha. Hearing his words, four of them burst into laughter and walked in front of a giant cave. They did spend a lot of time talking about other stuff instead of entering the dungeon. Your party has entered the fire demon dungeon, you can't leave until you clear this dungeon, you have 10 seconds to leave. Seeing a series of messages, George turned his head at Brian. This is the first time he saw a dungeon from which he can't leave without clearing it. It's okay. I prepared a power potion and haste potion because of this. We have to clear this dungeon. Brian nodded his head and replied. George nodded his head and his party moved forward. The light appeared from the fire burning on the wood stuck on the walls. Alright, before we move forward, let me give you some details about this dungeon. Brian stopped them and started explaining. This dungeon is divided into 3 levels and each level has higher level fire demons. As I said before, they are agile, strong, and look like humans. The first level will have almost 100 LVL 15 fire demons. The second level will have almost 200 LVL.15 fire demons. The third level will have almost 400 LVL.15 fire demons and a fire demon lord who is LVL.20. In short, we kill fast, use healing potions and mana restoration potions continuously and clear this dungeon. Any questions? Can we go back? Chapter 59 Fire Demon Dungeon Part 3 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Brian rolled his eyes hearing Tempest's words. Can you not be scared? They are just LVL.15 fire demons. Shirley and George are LVL.16. Dave is already LVL.15 and you are LVL.14. As for me, well, I don't think my LVL speaks about my strength. We will get over 100,000 EXP after killing all of them and extra EXP from the quest. So, let's go and slaughter these fire demons. I will repeat again, don't let your HP or MP go down to 50%. Use healing potions and mana restoration potions as many as you have. Now, let's get ready. Finally, Tempest calmed down a little. Dave patted his shoulder and smirked. Don't worry, I will protect you. Tempest couldn't help but squeeze a smile. 5 of them continued to walk for a while until they finally heard a growl. They paused their foot and noticed a creature walking toward them. His body was like a human, walking on 2 legs, with 2 hands, and wearing a T-shirt with pants. But, there was a slight difference in his face and hands. Brian, I thought you said they were humans with fire. They don't look like humans to me. George took out his sword and spoke. Those creatures were indeed like humans but their mouth was different. The sharp teeth were like wolves and the nails were longer. They're the claws of the wolves. I don't know what you mean but they look enough human to me. Haven't you seen people dressed in superhero costumes? Just think of these as wolverines with sharp teeth. Brian shrugged his shoulders and took out his swords as well. Slowly, the numbers of fire demons increased until almost 2/3 of the entire area they could see was covered by them. Dave gripped his hammer and muttered. Man! At this moment, I really wish I had powerful equipment. By the way, why didn't you guys create any equipment with a ranking like epic or legendary or even bronze and silver? There is no equipment ranking, and the only way to determine its quality is by its effect. Brian gave him a confused look and asked, "Haven't you looked at the forums properly? We have the ranking but not for equipment. There are two kinds of items. One is a normal item and another is a treasured item. 0. Weapons that can be found in stores, potions, are normal items. Of course, some store like Eden's store has treasured item but they cost a fortune. Because normal items are time consumable and non-reparable. But, treasured items can not only be repaired but also improved with the correct equipment. Treasured items are categorized into 6 categories. Flood Dragon Rank Treasured Item, Wyvern Rank Treasured Item, True Dragon Rank Treasured Item, Heavenly Dragon Rank Treasured Item, Divine Dragon Rank Treasured Item, and Legendary Dragon Rank Treasured Item. Wait a minute. Why is it ranked based on the levels of dragons? Who the hell make ranking like this? Dave questioned Brian at a fast pace, not giving him a chance to reply. Brian glared at him and didn't talk. The fire demons were already rushing towards them. He used mana in his feat, activating Shadow Escape. He also transferred his mana to his swords and passed between dozens of fire demons. Second stance, splash. 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 Stealth Dragon Claw, although his swords cut dozens of fire demons, only a few of them got deadly blows while others only got scratched. His blades were simply too far from most fire demons. As soon as he stooped at the middle, he swung his upper body with great speed and the force generated by his swords conjured a tornado around him. This tornado had fast-moving swords in it, as it sucked in fire demons and slashed them. First stance. Dragon Twister, splash. 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 Yellow Lightning. Yellow Lightning. Yellow Lightning. Bang. 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 Hey, I am still here, Brian shouted out loud from the middle of the fire demon horde. Fortunately, he used his swords to block the lightning bolt but it still struck him since electricity conducts through metal. Oh. Gulp. 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 He immediately took out his healing potion and drank it without hesitation. He raised his finger at his side and charged mana on his finger. The mana turned blue and a bolt of lightning came out of his finger. But, he didn't stop there. Thunderbolt. 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 Bang. 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 Slamming the thunderbolts on those fire demons, he immediately took out mana restoration potion and drank it without any hesitation. Gulp. Gulp. Crash. After drinking the potion, he threw the bottle on the ground and rushed toward another fire demon. He has barely killed 15 of them while others had only killed 5 or 6 fire demons individually. Devi. Tempest shouted while running away from the fire demon. I's voice attracted everyone's attention but Dave was the first one to rush. In less than a breath, he reached behind Tempest and slammed his hammer towards the ground. Crack. Crack. His hammer cracked the ground and forced fire demons to retreat but they immediately changed their strategy. They condensed the flames on their fist and shot dozens of fire streams at Dave. Seeing this, Dave's expression changed. He gripped his hammer and put it in front of him. Heat barrier. Tempest roared from behind and his mana transformed into a giant red barrier in front of Dave. Boom. 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 The flame stream struck the barrier and exploded. The waves of explosions didn't break the barrier but they continued to push the barrier very hard. Thanks, boy. Thud. Dave jumped by pushing his foot really hard on the ground. He almost touched the ceiling but, he grabbed his hammer and started channeling his mana into the hammer. Class ability. Berserker Blood 100 Hammer Strikes. Bang. 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 In less than a few seconds, Dave slammed his hammer on them nearly dozens of times. Although he didn't reach 100 as the name suggested, he did manage to break the bones of those fire demons below him. Roar! The wolf mouth of the fire demon roared and spewed out a massive fireball. But, it wasn't the single fire demon. As soon as he landed on the ground, every fire demon around him shot a fireball at him. Dave, strike on your back. Tempest roared from behind, and Dave without the slightest hesitation swung his arms and slammed his hammer against the fireballs coming from behind. His strike crashed those fireballs away, but there were still more than 7 fireballs coming from different sides. Immortal binding rope. Pull. At this moment, a yellow rope suddenly wrapped around him and pulled him away just before the fireballs touched him. Boom. Thud. 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 Oh, although he managed to escape from the middle of the explosion, the collision of 7 fireballs was enough to blast him away. Thankfully, his skin was thick enough to bear the impact of the explosion. Gah! On other hand, Tempest suddenly coughed out blood. He immediately took out the mana restoration potion and healing potion, drinking them one after another. But before he could recover, one of the fire demons spotted him and charged the fire spear at him. Fire-splitting sword, whoosh. Suddenly, a figure dashed behind him and swung his sword. His sword sliced the fire spear in half. 2 parts fell to the ground but didn't explode. Are you all right? George turned around and asked. But, suddenly that demon shot another fire spear at him. It moved with an amazing speed. Watch out. Earth wall. Crack. Crack. Boom. Arg. As soon as he conjured the earth wall to protect George, Tempest felt extreme pressure on his shoulder, pulling him down. George turned around and saw the earth wall intact against the fire spear. He was amazed. He turned around and spoke. No wonder, you have such weakness. A class that can help you do anything you want with enough imagination. No restriction of the element, no restriction of magic. If you didn't have such weak, you would be invincible. Tempest bitterly smiled and said, only for a few attacks. After that, I am pretty much useless and a burden. Well, you are not wrong. Thankfully, we discovered your abilities early on thanks to Brian. Let's try our new move. George nodded his head and smiled. This smile was quite creepy, but it brought shock to Tempest's face. Really? Right now? George nodded his head and asked, can't you bear the pressure? Guys, more fighting, less talking. Brian suddenly interrupted them. He was constantly using his Dragon Rider 97 sword art for the battle. Thankfully, it didn't consume a lot of mana. Don't worry. We have something to show you. George shouted and looked at Tempest. Tempest hesitated before sitting on the ground, cross-legged. He closed his eyes and entered a meditation state. George turned his head at Shirley and shouted, Shirley, grab Brian to here. It's time for Black Turtle Formation. Chapter 60 Fire Demon Dungeon Part 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What's the Black Turtle Formation? Brian asked when Shirley dragged him next to George. George, Shirley, and Dave immediately took position around Tempest while explaining. We are trying to come up with the battle formation, using the individual powers for the intense battle. Black Turtle Formation is the defensive formation where we block the attack until Tempest is ready. Brian narrowed his eyes and looked at Tempest. At this moment, Tempest was thinking something and his mana was revolving all around his body, but he didn't understand what he was thinking. What's he trying to do? Brian asked. George simply smiled and said, let's wait and see. Don't let anyone attack Tempest. Brian was really curious about Tempest's new move, but he held his curiosity in order to protect the Tempest. He held his sword and channeled his mana into the sword. He gripped the sword hilt with both of his hands and raised it. The mana slowly transformed into small bolts of lightning. As soon as he struck his sword on the ground, the small bolts turned larger, but they didn't go around him, rather only targeted the opponent in front of him. Third stance. Thunder Dragon Stomp. Bang. 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 Hey, watch your attack, Dave shouted from the side when some of the lightning bolts struck next to him. 0. Sorry. Brian giggled while apologizing. In his heart, he was simply laughing. He didn't care if Dave falls under his attack. His body was thick enough to bear the impact of his attack. Dave grunted and smashed his hammer on the ground. His hammer cracked the ground and created a shockwave that shook Brian, and he fell down. Brian glared at him but couldn't say anything. After all, he did just startle Dave as well. When will it end? Brian looked at George and asked. Don't worry, we will know instantly. George smirked as he replied. Brian felt a strange secret in his tone, but he didn't dive into it. He simply used his swords and blocked the enemy in front of him. After 1 minute, only 30 fire demons were left, but on other hand, they had already used 4 healing potions and 4 mana restoration potions. If they continue like this, then they will be instantly defeated in the 2nd or 3rd level. Just when Brian was going to ask again, his figure blurred a little. Teleport. A word rang in his mind as his body suddenly teleported far away. Only Tempest was left alone in the middle of 30 fire demons. Just when Brian realized it, he saw a strange wave of energy spreading out from Tempest. Thundering Flame Destruction Wave. Oh. Gah. These energy waves struck those fire demons, and in less than 5 seconds, their bodies disintegrated into nothingness. On other hand, Tempest fell to the ground, half dead. All of them stayed at their position for 2 minutes, and as soon as 2 minutes passed, George shouted. Now. He dashed towards Tempest and hurriedly took out 3 healing potions. He used all 3 of them on Tempest without any hesitation. What was that? Brian looked at Dave with confusion and asked. He could see the power of that destruction wave, but it was too overpowered, wasn't it? Some scientific stuff that I don't understand. You can ask him. Anyway, it was you who told him that bookworms can do anything with mere imagination. Unfortunately, he needs 5 minutes with 3 healing potions to recover, which is why we can't use it unless at the near the end. Dave replied while shrugging his shoulders. Brian turned his head at Tempest and curiously looked at him. He was really shocked by that attack. Yes, the only limitation of the bookworm class was the player's imagination. Anything is possible as long as he has imagination and the process behind it, especially for something very powerful. After 5 minutes, Tempest woke up and Brian was the first one to ask. How did you do it? Tempest wasn't able to focus on this question for a while. So, after 30 seconds, Brian asked once again. How did you do it? Tell him or else he will keep asking. George sighed helplessly as he walked away. Shirley and Dave also left while Brian looked at Tempest with bright stars in his eyes. Have you read the latest chapter of Sword Devil Also Dual Cultivates? Tempest asked. Brian shook his head. I didn't get much time. I will read it later. Anyway, it seems like the author wants to end it quickly. Oh, well, here is a small spoiler for you. In recent chapters, Chin created a new set of swords with different abilities derived from his planets. One of them was Thundering Flame Sword. I got really curious about this sword because my body couldn't handle other swords. But, I wasn't a swordsman either. So, I decided to study this move deeply. Did you know that when flame explodes, it releases a wave of destruction exactly a few microseconds before the flames spread out? Brian nodded his head and said, yeah. I do know that. The reason why the explosion is destructive is exactly because of those explosions. Yes, exactly. So, when the flames explode, the destruction released out of them can actually merge with the destructive capabilities of lightning. As you already know, the lightning bolt already has the destruction attribute. So, what if I can destroy the waves of flame before they spread out? Then, the only thing that remained would be the waves of destruction that can destroy anything it touches, from the microscopic level. So, when I release the flames for the explosion, I also release the lightning bolts just before the explosion spreads out. And, thus, a lightning bolt will merge with that destruction wave and increase the destructive outcome by several folds, destroying the explosion on its way. And, finally this wave spread out and destroys anything within 10 meters around it before its lightning bolts run out. And, to create this attack, I need to focus and meditate for 3 minutes or else, I might get affected by it. Brian stared at Tempest for a minute. Yes, he stared at Tempest for 60 seconds and it was enough to make Tempest blush. After a minute, he crouched down and patted Tempest's shoulder. "Kid, you and I are going to work together to create a better future for humanity." Saying so, he stood up and continued, "And, I will email you my address so that you can come and visit me." Hearing his words, Tempest's eyes widened. Brian wasn't a famous person but after contacting him for a while, he knows Brian is an extremely smart person and with his experience, he can teach him. "So, have you decided to teach him science?" George walked in closer to Brian and asked. "Yeah. First, I need to transform his 70% of pure nonsense about dark matter into scientific knowledge, then I will start teaching him. By the way, shouldn't we head to the second level now?" Brian shrugged his shoulders and pointed at the big hole in front of it. Behind this hole was level second and there are 200 fire demons waiting for them. "About that, I have been thinking of something. Should we let Tempest use his destruction wave from the start? And even if the enemies remain, we can protect him." George cleared his throat and spoke. Brian turned around and pulled Tempest up to his feet. He put his arms around Tempest's shoulder and cleared his throat. "About that, I just made a theory in my mind." At this moment, Tempest suddenly looked at him and asked, "So, is it really true that I shouldn't use my destruction wave here?" You caught that very quickly. Another point for you. After praising him, Brian turned his head at George and said, "I am afraid he can't use this destruction wave for much longer. Because there is one function in a firewall system that will delete anything including the player if it harms the virtual world for more than 3 times. Thankfully, his current attach hasn't reached 100% damage rate so the system hasn't warned him. Remember, although this is a game, it is also virtual reality evolved by zero-point energy. His destruction waves aren't just destroying his enemies, they are destroying the codes and because the destruction wave is very powerful, even the invisible codes can be destroyed. That's too bad." George sighed after hearing his words. He knew Brian wouldn't lie about this. But, he was really surprised that there was such a function in New Gods. Tempest bites his lips but he wasn't sad. He still impressed Brian after all. As for Brian, he wasn't worried at all. He never expected Tempest's attack so he is fully prepared for this. "Alright guys, do you still remember our first quest?" Brian looked at them and asked. "Of course, we do." "Wait, you are planning to use that. But, isn't it going to affect you?" George asked. Brian raised his index finger and nodded his head, "You are right. But, I have a plan to neutralize it after this quest. So, let's just go and finish this quest quickly."